and welcome back for another episode of Becoming the Light from the Shadows of Abuse. Now, before I will introduce tonight's guest to you, but the first thing I want to say, we did have a disclaimer in our notes. We do have a trigger warning. I know that we're all expecting things to be about abuse, so we're not issuing trigger warnings all the time. But this episode, Kaila does actually deal with an accident involving a gun that resulted in a death. So we have a trigger warning about that. So if you don't want to listen to the details, we're not going to talk too much about the details, but if you don't want to listen to something related to that, then please don't listen to this episode. We're just letting you know that that's in there. I thought that was important to do. Okay, so that said, tonight's guest is Kaila Corsiglia. I'm going to let her introduce herself, really, as I do prefer to with all my guests. They know themselves much better than I do. So I'm ever so grateful to have Kaila here with us, and the amazing story that she has to share. So, Kaila, welcome.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm excited about it.
And I tell you why I always appreciate everyone, but you told me earlier, I was chatting to you and I asked you, do you do many podcasts? And you said, actually, this is the first time that you've really told your story.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really special, and I really appreciate you doing that. And no doubt there would be people that really benefit from what you have to share. But before we go back and look at what happened, tell us who you are now. Tell us who Kaila is, who you've become, what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us all about you.
Okay. Yeah, where to start? There's so much. Well, I'm Kaila. I currently live in Northwest Indiana. I was born and raised here. It's just about in 40 minutes outside of Chicago. Living in a town called Maryville with my boyfriend in an apartment. And yeah, I guess my big thing right now is plants. I love taking care of plants. They're everywhere, all over the apartment. I have a lot of them. You can't really see any right now because I'm in the bedroom, but there's one over there. But yeah, as of right now, I've just started an RTT business, an RTT and coaching business. I'm hoping to mix both, so I'm not just solely focusing on RTT. Before that, I was working in an electric company, which was actually my father's the CEO of the company. I'd been working there since I was 16 years old, I think, and I always hated it. Did not enjoy it. I felt really trapped there. I think it was a huge money block for a long time, honestly. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling. I don't feel like I know what to say.
Oh, no, that's okay. And I was just about to bring you back, because obviously you mentioned that you're an RTT therapist and a coach, which is amazing, because obviously I'm an RTT therapist as well.
Yeah.
And it's such an incredible methodology of healing and therapy that there are just not enough of us. Obviously,
Yeah.
just a few thousand of us scattered across the world at the moment. So it's always wonderful to see and hear of other people who are moving into the RTT modality. And yeah, between us, we can make some really big changes for sure. And what you said about coaching, yeah, very, very definitely. I think the two go hand in hand. And certainly, I never do an RTT session without supporting it with a coaching session. I think it's absolutely vital, because our clients do get some very, very big shifts, and we do then have to be able to support them with the coaching to help them move forward. So it's great that you're doing that. But obviously, as you said, you didn't start there. And like most of us who end up doing something like this, I know that where you have ended up is very much based on an experience that you had that triggered a series of events for you. Um, and I know that that event is the one that we mentioned. So I hope anyone who didn't want to hear about anything involving guns or an accidental death or shooting or anything has tuned out by now. But let's go to that, because I know that that was very, very significant for you. It was a life-changing event that happened. So, I mean, obviously, don't tell us any more than you are comfortable with. I know it was a while ago for you now, and you've done all your healing. But yeah, tell us about that event and how it changed you and what it then led to for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so when I was 18 years old, I'm about 27, almost 28 now. So it's been almost 10 years. Um, when I was 18, my first serious, relatively serious boyfriend, we'd been together for almost 2 years. Um, he accidentally shot himself when we were sitting in his bedroom, and he ended up dying very shortly after that. And obviously, being an 18-year-old girl who wasn't, I wasn't ever really exposed to that type of thing. I didn't grow up with hunters or anything. I didn't like gore on television. That was incredibly traumatic for me, and also for his sister, who was home at the time as well. And I always like to say that in that instance, especially because I was so young, like I wasn't a child, but I also wasn't an adult. And there were still so many things I was working out in life. I still didn't know where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. I didn't feel like I knew who I was really at that point in my life. There was a lot of confusion and a lot of people pleasing. I like to say that there was like a path that kind of showed up. It was just like all of a sudden, like a pathway opened up in front of me, and there was a fork, and I could either take the road of destruction that a lot of people would usually take. They'd blame themselves, say it was my fault, or just say I live in an evil universe, and that's one of the pathways. And the other one was just to decide and know in my heart that it had happened for a reason, and for whatever reason, like wherever he is now, that he's okay, and that there's a lesson, that there was a lesson to be learned within that. And then, every step of the way down that pathway is just kind of learning to better yourself, to make sure that you never end up in a situation like that again, and to make sure that, you can prevent other people from being in experiences like that again. So,
So yeah, that whole thing, that must have been, I just can't imagine. I can't imagine it as an adult at any time dealing with that. And as you say, a fairly naive 18-year-old.
yeah.
I just can't imagine. So which of the paths did you take? What happened to you straight afterwards dealing with this? Because that we're saying this was 10 years ago, and I
Mhm.
know that 10 years ago there was not the understanding around trauma, and there
Yeah.
was not the support available that there is now. I
Yeah.
absolutely know that. So what happened to you after that event?
I think it was really mismanaged, and by no fault of my family's. No one's prepared to handle a situation like that. But
Sure.
it took me a long time to get into therapy with a proper therapist. I think the first therapist that I ended up seeing, she was a marriage and family therapist, and she
Mm,
didn't know how to deal with trauma. Every time I brought it up, she would kind of pull me back to the positive when I wasn't dealing with the trauma that happened. But anyway, I dropped into a deep depression um, for, I want to say, like at least 3 months. There was a lot of just kind of like, I felt like a ghost for a few months. I didn't feel like I was feeling anything. I even remember being at his funeral and being like, why am I not crying? And I was obviously in shock,
yeah.
for they would call it shell shock in war. I just wasn't exhibiting emotions. And I couldn't. Like I couldn't feel anything. And I was constantly worrying about what everyone was thinking about me in those moments. Like why isn't she feeling anything, and whatever. And so definitely the depression, but I do remember waking up one day and just being like, that's it. Like, I'm not doing this to myself. And at that point, I think I was being lazy. It had been months where I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to do my laundry or eat. And so there's like my room, and I'm an organized person. And so having things like out of their place wasn't normal for me. And so I remember, the fork had been there, but I just kind of was sitting at the fork, I didn't want to
Okay.
move. But once I woke up that one morning, excuse me, I'll never forget it because I woke up and I was just like I have to choose what I'm gonna do now. And I knew consciously that I had a choice. Like you see people take the destructive road all the time, and I knew I couldn't do that. I was like, that's not me. And so even in the very beginning, I was like, I'm choosing to see this as a gift. And excuse me, it didn't manifest that way for me for a while either, even with that mindset, because the whole reason that we're here is because of abuse and that type of thing in relationships, and that did manifest in my relationships a lot. But on a personal level, I chose the positive path. And even in my abusive relationships, I did see it manifesting in a helping way. It wasn't like I was being destructive. I was finding myself in destructive relationships because I wanted to help them. Like I
Yeah.
wanted to change my own story. Where I couldn't save the first love of my life, I then wanted to change the lives of the next people that came into my experience.
And that's a huge realization, and we'll come back to that because that's a big thing in
Yeah,
itself. And as
yeah,
RTT therapists, we know how that was uncovered and everything. So we need to talk about that. I just
yeah.
want to touch on something that you said, and this is what I'm telling people all the time, and this is one of
Mhm.
my real frustrations, and it seems to be worldwide. The medical support system for mental health
Yeah.
does not refer people with trauma, people with
Mhm.
extreme depression, acute
Yeah.
anxiety, does not refer them to trauma therapists.
Yeah.
And you've just I, it was so beautiful the way that you just so easily led into it, that you
Yeah.
were with the wrong therapist who couldn't deal with your trauma.
Yeah.
And I want
And
to
even at
reiterate,
19 years old, I knew that. At 19, I was like, this woman can't help me.
right,
Yeah.
and I just want to reiterate that so strongly, that any of you who have trauma or are
Mhm.
trying to recover from the debilitating and deep-seated effects of abuse,
Yeah.
you need to see a trauma therapist,
Yeah.
whether it's someone holistic or somatic, whichever one. But an ordinary therapist, and even so many psychologists,
Yeah.
so many people end up coming to me or someone like you, Kaila, and saying that their psychologist has absolutely no clue about how to deal with trauma. And I
Yeah.
think it's because it is very specialized. There is a specific way of dealing with it. Yes, you can heal from it. Yes, it can be dealt with, but
Mhm.
only someone who deals with trauma will know the process, will know how to handle it. So thank you so much for bringing attention to that extremely
Yeah.
valid point. And how the therapist kept trying to take you back to what she was comfortable with,
Exactly.
rather, and that's the problem. That
Mhm.
is the problem with a lot of people who don't specialize in trauma, aren't trained in trauma, that they will take you back to what they are comfortable with because they are not comfortable with, able to deal with the trauma that you are expressing. So
Yeah.
so um so this point that you just made, again, another extremely valid point, because so often people don't see their own belief patterns and their own behavior patterns, and this idea, that you uncovered, that after the death of your boyfriend, obviously with the trauma that you suffered, you then allowed for yourself abusive relationships
Yeah.
because you saw yourself, obviously subconsciously, you weren't conscious of it at the time, um, as trying to change their story. So tell us more about that. That's absolutely fascinating, and obviously totally fits in with the work we do through RTT. Uncovering that and realizing that, and what was your whole healing journey? What did you go through, and what did you use to heal?
Well, after the experience with the marriage and family therapist trying to deal with the trauma, I ended up outside of the therapy world for a while because it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth, after that. And I very quickly was back in university. I was at Purdue University, and they offer free therapists to any students that are enrolled, but
Okay.
they're all students themselves.
It's a good service. Right.
And so, but I mean, even then, and even thinking about it now, I don't think I ever realized that I never actually did see a trauma specialist.
Mhm.
Um, I only saw like student teachers, and then eventually I saw an actual clinical psychologist. But anyway, I found myself in therapy sessions with student teachers. They were all going on to get their doctorates in psychology, and they they mainly specialize in mindfulness and meditation, which I'd never heard about before. I'd heard about meditation, but I wasn't practicing it regularly. I'd attempted a guided meditation here and there. Um, but once I got into, the mindfulness meditation aspects of healing, um, I'd like to say that mindfulness is what healed me. Just being able to find presence within the panic, if you will, because I think it was 2 years after the incident when I was finally regularly seeing a therapist, and he diagnosed me with post traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
And at that point, I was having pretty frequent anxiety attacks, panic attacks, and I was just anxious all the time in general. I always had like a big knot in my chest that I could never get rid of. And through his help, he taught me some mindfulness tools, just learning to like be present with your emotion and being able to sit with it in a way where it gives it less power. It feels less like the emotion has control over you and more so that you have control over the emotion.
Yeah, and of course, what we do know these days, dealing with trauma, that mindfulness and meditation, and then
Mhm.
of course hypnotherapy, which is a stage further than meditation,
Yeah.
they play such an important role. Mindfulness and the ability to be calm and to be still and to just sit with things, and
Yeah.
as you said, just allow yourself to be and to be calm and just to know. Yeah, mindfulness, that there's a saying about trauma, that there is no healing without mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. I
Yeah.
think that's so true.
So,
But yeah, I focused a lot of on mindfulness and meditation, and then I found myself in mindfulness meditation groups at school with with groups of people who were also studying, and we would all meditate together. And I found a lot of healing within the community of that group. And then it also connected me with a clinical psychologist who mainly focused on mindfulness and meditation. And
right.
and through her influence and through that group, I decided way back then that I wanted to be a clinical psychologist.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so I focused on mindfulness and meditation types of psychology in school. Well, for the entirety of my time at university, I planned on being a clinical psychologist, and then I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and then I was accepted into a master's program in Chicago for a clinical counseling degree, where I'd be able to counsel people after a 3-year program instead of a 6-year PhD program.
Right, right.
And so I was accepted into that program, and then I decided 2 months before the program started that I didn't want to do it because I knew it was going to put me in a crap load of debt because in the US, school is very expensive. I
Oh,
think by the end of my 3 year time in the program, I believe I would have been over $100,000 in debt, if not 200,000. Um, and that was only for the tuition, not for they basically tell you not to work during that period of time, so you have to take out extra loans for rent unless you're living in your mom's basement,
yeah, that's a
and
huge
also
amount of money. It's a wonder that anyone does it.
yeah, so I was like, I was like, I can't do this. Like I didn't want to be stuck in Chicago. I've always had a dream of traveling, being able to explore the world and work at the same time. So I can, do both and make a living while I'm on the road. And also to relocate. I don't want to live in the Midwest in the United States forever. I've always had a dream of moving to the West, in the United States. So because of those three things, like I wouldn't be able to move around much. I'd be stuck in Chicago because you build up your clientele in the city where you're taking classes, and then and also the amount of debt. I didn't want to live a life in debt. I chose not to do that. And then
Okay.
I was totally lost. 'Cause I was like, what am I going to do now? This was my plan. For like 6 years it was my plan, and then I just, on a gut feeling, it was like, I call it intuition now, but back then I was like, it was my gut was telling me, don't do this. You're going to regret it.
So, what did you do instead? Tell us about that. Tell us what you did choose to do and how that worked out for you.
Well, I would, like I said, I was lost with it for a while. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I always imagined that I would help people. Um, that would be that I would do for a living. And I had other hobbies. I've always been a musician. And I play the guitar and I'm a singer. Um, and I've been told many times a good one for both. Like I'm a good singer, I'm a good guitarist, but I never wanted to do it for money. It's like what people say, like it stops being art when you get paid, because you just feels like you're, what's the way to explain it? Like an artist, I think any artist would understand. As soon as you start accepting payment for it, it's almost like it puts too much pressure on it.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's how that felt for me. So I didn't want to do that, and I
I
liked
tell you,
plants. I was like,
I tell you what, I would like to touch on there actually, that was
yeah,
very interesting. And
mhm,
it's when you said that you like to take care of people.
yeah,
And you've said it's a theme that has come through a few times with you.
yeah.
And where does that come from? Was that your role within your family? I think this is very important for people listening, because you know how Marissa teaches us that there are roles within the family. There's the
Yeah.
sick one, there's the carer, there's the rebellious one, there's the clever one. Were you the carer?
No, I
You
was the
weren't the
rebel.
carer.
I was the rebellious one. My sister was the sick one. My sister was sick all throughout my childhood and even into her adulthood now. She has a very rare eye disorder or eye disease. I think it's an autoimmune disorder, called pars planitis. And So she was sick. She was diagnosed with that when she was, I think, 3 or 4 years old. And she was consistently at the hospital. And then I feel like if I was anything, I was the quiet one. I was just quiet. I always wanted to make sure that I was good. That way, she could have the spotlight. And then when I
I
became a teenager, I totally rebelled. I was,
Obviously, as you would.
yeah,
Yeah, exactly. That was almost certain. You were either going to become quiet and withdrawn or rebel. Yeah.
yeah. So I was definitely quiet and withdrawn when I was a kid. But then the second that I hit 13, I just was off the walls. I was doing drugs, I was drinking, I was hanging out with the wrong people. I was, slacking at school. I thought that good grades were embarrassing. I was lying, and I was doing everything that you shouldn't do when you're a teenager.
And when, so having done the personal work since, do you look at that time and realize or think, maybe I'm wrong, I don't want to assume, that it was related to your sister having all the attention and suddenly you were going to get the attention even if it was in a bad way? Where did that come from?
You
The
know,
rebellious side?
it might have, but that's something that, interestingly enough, I haven't explored all that much, but I think that makes a lot of sense that, I wasn't really getting a lot of the spotlight and
Yeah.
attention, and then, actively rebelled later on, and
Yeah,
definitely.
and that's the reason I brought it up in that way is obviously it's a scenario that I've come across, and it's a pattern that's recognized in human behavior and psychology.
Yeah.
That for a while you're happy to take a back seat, but then you have needs that were being unmet, so part of you is going to go, I need to be seen, I need to be heard. And you don't really care which way. And you
Mhm.
probably also, you will have been observing and learning, and you probably knew that by being good, you were never going to get that. You had to do something to stand out.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what you did. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
we don't
that's really, really interesting insight. I really
yeah,
like.
we don't need to always explore all these things. Once we've healed from them, we can
Mhm.
let them be. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting point because yeah,
Yeah.
as we're talking, obviously these things, they just strike me. I'm always looking for the patterns and the root.
Trust me, it's the same thing I do. That's
Yeah,
what we're supposed to do, right? That's what we're trained to do.
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so tell us about where. Actually, I tell you what would be interesting before
Mhm.
before we move on, the abusive relationships that you moved into, because yeah, that's right, because I was interested in this caring role, and clearly it hadn't come from your childhood. That's why we never assume anything, but we had
Yeah.
some other good insights there anyway.
Mhm.
So yeah, so these relationships, what what did those relationships look like, and did they have a negative effect on you, or did you always kind of stay, you sound as if you stayed pretty strong through those, and it was, and looking back you realized that all you wanted to do was care for these people and look after them, and the changing the end of the story, that makes absolute sense.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I was really lost for a lot of years. But looking back, even into my rebellious years as a teenager, I'm always incredibly thankful for the experiences. Because well, first of all, it gives you a little bit of insight into what you don't want. The more that you get what you don't want, the more that you realize, like, okay, like that's just not for me. Um, and I think that I found that looking back in a lot of my old relationships, they all start out innocent enough, and they always do, but as I age and look back, I'm like, okay, there was a red flag and a red flag and a red flag, and I just wasn't seeing them, that or I was ignoring them. Like
Okay.
the first person that I dated, I think that I was just interested in him because he was interested in me. I think that was honestly the only thing that drew me in about him,
Oh,
and it
that
was very easy for me to set a boundary in that relationship because as soon as I felt like he was treating me poorly, I told him that I didn't want any part in the relationship anymore. Um and then because I was threatening to leave, he threatened to commit suicide. And
right.
he knew what happened to me. And so he was just trying to, it was a fear tactic. We were like not even 20 years old, and he was trying to scare me into being in a relationship with him, and I was like, sorry for cursing, but fuck you. Like, no. Like, and I ended up getting him in a lot of trouble because he was in the military. And I have no regrets. I don't regret it. And then, after that, sorry,
That's a
what?
gross that's a gross manipulation.
It is, exactly, but again, I was self-aware enough at that point that
Right.
I knew what was happening, and I was like, you're not wasting my time." I was like, If that's what you wanna do, then, like, do you, but you're not gonna guilt trip me into being with you."
Wow,
Uh,
yeah, so you did have amazing strengths. So
Yeah, and I mean, that's what happened across the board. I kept ending up with destructive people. Like, the next person I dated was a heroin addict, and, I was convinced, that I could help him and that he would stop being an addict for me, which that's never gonna happen. Just for anyone who's listening to this, you're never gonna stop somebody from being an addict. It's gotta come from within themselves, and I think to take like, even to date, excuse me, he's still an addict, if I understand correctly. I haven't spoken to him in years, but heroin isn't something that people kick very easily, unless you come to an RTT therapist.
yeah, we certainly can do some work with that.
Mhm.
But
But yeah, same with that. I think after him, I was with somebody who I was absolutely in love with. I would have done anything to be with him, and he would not commit, like, under any circumstances, but I would just continuously throw myself at him. Um, and the reasons that he always couldn't commit is because, there was something going on personally with him. Like, he that he didn't want to tell me about. Like, it's just too horrible. I can't tell you what it is. Or
right,
like, or eventually it turned into like, I have a drug addiction, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. But that's why we can't be together. Um, After that, it was a narcissist who, surprisingly enough, I didn't even realize was a narcissist until after the relationship ended.
this
Until after,
happens.
yeah,
Yeah,
I had no idea.
you and hundreds and thousands and probably millions of other
Mhm.
people. It's when
Yeah.
you're trying to do the healing and you look back and you suddenly go, "Oh my God." I'm
It was like a year ago. I was like, "Oh my god, he was a narcissist." Like an actual narcissist.
yeah,
I think I was having a conversation with somebody, and this is how I realized. I was having a conversation with somebody, and they were talking about like, "Oh, I don't think I've ever met a narcissist before." And I was like, "I don't think I've ever met one either." And then all of a sudden I was like, "Wait, yes I have." I was like, "He was a narcissist."
Yeah, well, I've been married nearly 25 years, and it was 4 years ago that I started to explore with a therapist because I just
Yeah.
I got to the end of myself and I just couldn't work out, why is this so hard?
Yeah.
Why is this so hard? And I
Mhm.
that was when I first started to explore with a mindfulness therapist actually. I started to explore and he pointed out to me that I was probably married to a narcissist,
Yeah.
and I did loads of work on that. And yeah, I was married to a covert narcissist, and that's why it was so hard. But again, over all that time, the information wasn't available, the understanding wasn't there, people didn't talk about this. And perfectly well, with narcissism, we blame ourselves because they blame us for everything. They're
Mhm.
very good at guilt tripping and manipulating, and we just feel that it must be us.
Yeah.
So many people have relations. Some people, well, I'm sure I don't know who you've been seeing with the RTT, but I'm sure you'll find that some people will be talking to you and they will realize, my goodness, I have had relationships with 3 narcissists. And
Yeah.
now I'm finding out why I feel like I do about myself and why I keep doing this.
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah, they're very clever.
Yeah,
It's
I agree entirely. I'm just, again, another situation where I'm just thanking God that I kind of, I don't know where the self-awareness came from. But it was just, I always bring it back to intuition. I just get this like gut feeling that's just like, something's not right. You need to leave.
Yeah,
And
so and that funny enough, just before you said that, I was going to say, I know that in your life and in your work, you say that you use a lot of intuition. So tell
Mhm.
us about that. How does that? I mean, obviously we all do, but it's yeah. Tell everyone how that works for you, because I love what you've said about the you just get that, you get the red flags, you get the thought something's not right here.
Yeah.
And I think so often people have those, but they ignore them. They don't do
Yeah.
anything with them.
It's
So
easy to ignore it, especially when you're not taught what it is. You know
yeah,
what I mean? And I've been thinking about it a lot lately because I've been like I've been establishing like my own language with it, if you will, in recent years. But the way that it came about in the beginning, I can remember even as a teenager being in situations with people where I just suddenly would get this sick feeling in my gut, like this just isn't right. And that's just kind of how it felt. Like this isn't right. Like I have no like factual information to prove that this isn't right, but it just feels like, everyone else would think that they were doing something fun or whatever, like it was making fun of somebody or, childlike things back then, like ridicule and, making fun of people or spending time with certain people, they would just give me like an ick feeling. Like
Right.
it same thing with like if I was ever um say you're like at a gas station, like this hasn't happened, but it'd be like assuming plenty of women will know what I'm talking about. You're at a gas station and like a random man walks up to you and like asks if he can pay for your gas and you're just
Right.
like, ew. And that's just kind of how it would feel in the beginning. And then like as I got older, it would start progressing into like a whisper. And the whisper, it's not like it would say things, but it would just like I'd just know things, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. And that's what I call an intuitive knowing now. And I remember I had a lot of that in the relationship that I was in prior to the one I'm in now. And I would try and tell him like I just have this feeling that like this is going on, or I have a feeling that like this is going on. And he'd get like furious because he'd be like, you have no factual information that that's happening, and like what are you talking about, and like you can't just like that's just you being insecure. And he tried to shut it down all the time. And then of course later on he'd come back after we broke up, not during the relationship. He'd never admit that to me while we were in a relationship, but after the relationship he did admit to me that almost all of my gut feelings that I brought up to him were completely on point. And I was just like,
Yeah.
see, thank you.
And
um
And I think that's important for people to hear that as well.
yeah,
And the other thing I was going to say, when you were talking about how he used to shut you down and
yeah.
just try and put you off what you were saying, we have
Hmm.
to remember, and again, this is something that people are just not taught, that when someone is trying to put you down and diminish you and make you irrelevant in that way, it
Yeah.
comes from their own sense of it's their own lack, it's their own insecurities in themselves. And this
Hmm.
is something that I say over and over because we are just not taught. And
Yeah.
when you can look at it and understand that if someone is abusing you or controlling you or putting you down or dismissing you in any way, it comes from their own sense of lack.
Exactly.
And that gives everything a completely different
Mhm.
perspective.
Yeah.
And it's so important to know. And obviously, it's something that you knew.
Yeah, that was definitely the lesson that I pulled from that relationship. Because drawing it back years ago when I was attempting to, the one that I was madly in love with that wouldn't be with me, eventually we did end up into a relationship. We ended up in a
I'm not even
relationship,
going to
and
ask how that went.
I mean, it had its good points. Absolutely. I don't want to say that it was an absolutely horrible relationship, because I think that in a lot of ways where, I do a lot of this work, he also does a lot of his own work. And so there'd been a lot of changes through the years. But he still he was controlling, and he did do a lot of putting down. And I think my therapist actually was the one who told me, she was when I'd go in and I'd talk to her about, things that were happening. And I like to say this was my turnaround relationship, so I will be eternally grateful to him for the lessons
Mhm.
that he taught me. Um, but she referred to it as bulldozing, basically
Right.
what he was doing, which is, I think, a psychological term, if I'm not incorrect, if I'm correct. Do you know if that's a psychological term?
It's not one that I've heard or that I use, but that doesn't mean that it's not, because there's so much information out there. We take what we use, and the terms and things, there's so many of them. But I imagine it's yeah, just swiping you completely out of the way and making you totally irrelevant.
Yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah.
They just kind of everything that you say that you want is kind of bulldozed over, and
Yeah.
you're made kind of to feel guilty for wanting things in the first place.
That's
And
exactly that's
mhm,
exactly what my husband did.
yeah. So I mean,
Exactly.
maybe in a way he was a bit of a narcissist too. I'm not sure. I would hate to label somebody a narcissist when they aren't actually a narcissist, because that's horrible label. But yeah, definitely when my therapist told me that, it was a bit of a shock. I was like, what do I even want? I was like, I felt like I knew what I wanted, and I always knew what I wanted. I knew who I was until I entered, back into, because we were back and forth for a lot of years. And I did have a lot of identity issues within that relationship, because I wanted it to work, but I knew that if I was myself, it wouldn't. Because yeah.
Ah,
And so I just shoved, myself aside for a long time just to appease him, so he
yeah.
wouldn't leave, which I knew eventually, I remember it was the moment I was sitting on my bathroom floor in my first apartment. I was sitting on the floor. I don't remember what we were fighting about, but there was some kind of fight that had gone on, and he, was making me feel alone. I was feeling alone. And I remember like sitting, and this is when the intuition comes in. I remember getting this, like, it almost felt like a warm hug, if you will. It was like I wasn't alone. Even though I was totally alone, I was like in a pitch black bathroom sitting on the floor sobbing. And all of a sudden I just felt this like hushed feeling. And it was just like, you're not alone. And I just like suddenly felt like it's not just me right now. And I like to say that was a turnaround moment, because in that moment I was just like, I will genuinely never be alone ever. And I remember like
That's
calling, I don't know how spiritual you get, but I was like calling on like an all loving, energy, if that
Well, that
resonates.
comes from you.
Exactly, yeah, and it
You
comes
know,
from
you're you're never alone when you can actually be with yourself.
yep.
And when you understand that everything you need is within yourself, you are never alone. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I realized in that moment, was just like, I'm with myself and I didn't hate it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure
Yeah.
there are some people who don't like sitting with themselves. But yeah, I sat with myself, and I was comforting myself, and I was like, it was like I was hugging myself. And it's such a weird thing to explain if you've never experienced it yourself. But yeah, I felt like I'll never be alone. And then very shortly after that, I ended the relationship that I was in. Oh, and also to bring it back to the bulldozing, because it was the same time when I had a lot of career upset. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had just decided I wasn't going to go to university for a graduate's degree. And and when I was in therapy and she was explaining to me bulldozing, she said not only does bulldozing kind of shatter your identity, because it makes you feel like you're not allowed to want the things that you actually want, because you can't ask for them because they're just going to be swept aside, but it also can disrupt every other aspect of your life, because not only in that relationship are you not getting what you want, but eventually you start to get to the point where you can't even ask for what you want in everyday life
Yeah.
outside of the relationship. So
Yeah.
I was so confused about, if I wanted to relocate, about, where I wanted to go to school, what I wanted in the relationship, like who I really was, like what I liked. Um and yeah, then I had the moment in the bathroom where I was like, I'll never be alone. I know I'll never be alone. I don't need to be in this relationship for fulfillment. And the relationship ended, and then, over the last, 2 years, I've snowballed into all of this stuff that I'm into now, where I feel like I'm more aligned with who I really am. I feel like I've never been so aligned with who I really am. I'm not afraid of expressing myself. I know it'll make me happy. I have like my big life visions and I'm not afraid to ask for them and to pursue them. And not only that, but I found RTT,
Yeah.
um, which I know is going to snowball into an incredibly fulfilling career where I get to help people remotely from wherever I want to, just like I was originally wanting from clinical psychology. So yeah, I'm
Fantastic.
excited. Yeah.
You've come full circle. And I think there's another amazing point that you touched on as well that we probably need to expand on. And it was
Hmm.
very interesting to hear you say that you were denying yourself.
Yeah.
You were certain. It comes from being, knowing that you're not enough. I
Yeah.
can't be myself because then he won't be with me. And
Yeah.
I just want anyone listening to this to really take this on board,
Hmm.
because when you try to be something that you're not, number one, it can't work out because you're not being authentic.
Yeah.
And for healthy loving relationships, what we need is honesty and authenticity.
Yeah.
And the most amazing things happen when you are authentic and you show up as exactly who you are. Because sure, the wrong people will reject you because you won't be right for them, but
Yeah.
you will be right for the right people.
Hmm.
And instead of doing that, we all spend time trying to be something that we're not, trying to fit in with people that don't really want us.
Yeah,
Because if they
exactly.
really wanted us, they would accept us however we are.
Yeah,
And there's such an important lesson in that, because it doesn't just lead to emotional ill health, it leads to physical ill health as well.
exactly.
When you're trying to live in a way that is, as you've said, not aligned with who you really are, the effects are not just emotional, they're physical as well.
Hmm. Yeah.
So yeah. So tell us more. Obviously, we're nearly done now, and you've come full circle. So
Mhm.
tell us more now about your what's happening for you moving forward. What are you developing for yourself now?
Well, to continue full circle, I am currently in an incredibly healthy and happy relationship um, with somebody who I've been able to be and will continue to be my complete authentic self with. He accepts every aspect of me. I don't feel like I need to hide anything from him or um, like I'm not afraid to ask for the things that I want or to make it clear the things that make me uncomfortable and, set healthy boundaries. All of that's come incredibly naturally for us. And
Great.
I think a little bit more difficult for him because, everyone's on their own journey. But I do think that we can express an authenticity with each other in a way that, by the way, isn't always easy. It's not like you just find the right person one day and everything just unfolds beautifully.
No.
It's still a mess. It's still a
Yeah,
freaking mess.
because of all
But
the baggage that you bring, and because you are both on your own journey, and you have to kind of weave that path in together.
yeah, definitely. And like authenticity is messy sometimes because like you said, there's baggage and there's also a learning curve, learning each other but like the thing that I find the most important um about like a healthy relationship is being authentic even when it's scary, like opening up and sharing like the deepest parts about yourself because the plan is to spend your life with somebody, like and you don't want to be hiding parts of yourself for your whole life, and so
No.
kind of opening doors in a way that you never have before. I think that's one of the most important aspects to a relationship, and that's the thing that I never found before, Josh. He is absolutely willing to open every door, even if there's something scary behind that door. And I'm the same thing. Like, sometimes I open doors, and then the next day I'm just like, I'm really sorry. And he's just like, I love you anyway, and we talk about it, we communicate about it, and it's not like some people where they'll have an outburst and then they'll just never talk about it. We always try and communicate openly. But I guess my point is that after all of the drama throughout my 20s of experiencing nothing but, like a long line of inauthentic and destructive people. I am now with somebody who is consistently trying to better himself, arguably sometimes too much. So it's definitely gone full circle relationship wise. And then with everything else, I'm slowly but surely building the RTT business. It's something I've never done before, obviously. I did want to go into clinical psychology, so I'm pretty comfortable working one on one, but it's a little bit difficult putting yourself out there, like in this instance. Like talking about yourself and putting out content and attracting customers or clients, sorry, to you. So that's been a bit of a journey for me is learning how to market myself,
Yeah.
um, and show people that I can actually help them. And so that's been my journey recently.
So with
And
the
outside,
RTT, have you found, just so people listening know, have you
yeah,
found that you specialize in any particular area with the RTT, or are you just kind of being general at the moment?
I really wanted to lean away from generality because I want to specialize, and I think that my original plan was to try and help people pursue their life purpose or understand why they weren't pursuing their life purpose, and then kind of toss it into a package deal. But then I had a lot of imposter syndrome around that because I'm currently not living my life purpose entirely. I am inching closer and closer every day, but I did have imposter syndrome around that. So I think what I've been wanting to focus on, because this whole conversation that we've been having is about how much experience I have in relationships. Um,
Ah,
so I think that I would really, really love to work with people who have issues. And I mean, I have. I'm currently working with somebody with relationship issues right now. I see her I think I see her once a month, a little bit more than once a month. And we kind of are exchanging services back and forth right now. She helps me with some stuff and I help her with some stuff. So I'm helping her with relationship issues, and I think that that's definitely my strong suit.
okay,
I have the most experience with that right now.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah, so and obviously you're, as you say, you've got this knowing intuition, and
Yeah,
you will find the right path. So
exactly.
yeah.
And I trust that the right people will find me. If my message resonates with anybody at all, like I would love to get a I think that you'll have all my information, right? Like my
We will have all of your links. Yeah, so if anyone is listening
Mhm.
and can really resonate with Kayla and what she's saying, she's an RTT therapist. RTT is absolutely incredible. It's my methodology of choice. And if
Mhm.
you're struggling with anything at all, I mean, she has said she's particularly dealing with relationship issues at the moment for people, but if Kayla has said anything that makes you think, I would love to talk to her, I would love to find out more about what she does and how she can help me,
Yeah.
then certainly all of the links will be in the notes for the episode. So are you able to verbally tell people easily where they can contact you, your website or anything like that?
Yeah, my website is Kaila Marie Kaila Marie Coaching.com, and my first name is spelled Kaila, so Kaila Marie
Coach.
coaching.com. That's my website. And then my Instagram is instagram.com/loner with the backpack. And then you can find me at Facebook at facebook.com/Kaila Marie Coaching, I believe, or it's just Kaila Marie. Um, and then my personal Facebook page is facebook.com/Kaila Marie Corsiglia, I believe.
Okay, so people can look you up, and yes,
Yeah.
that was just in case people are just listening
Mhm.
rather than watching, but certainly all of your contact details will be in the show notes. And yeah, I just really want to thank you for sharing your story with us.
Yeah.
And just, you know, what we find is with the stories that we're telling, the variations, you know,
Yeah,
trauma is undefined. It doesn't have to be one thing or another.
yeah,
And it's all about how it affects you and how you then move forward with that. And, you know, like the experience you had in the bathroom, this is very much about letting people know that they are not alone.
yeah,
Other people are going through this, have been through this, and we have found a way. You
yeah.
don't have to despair, you don't have to be stuck. uh,
Hmm.
we're here very much to let people know that there is a way forward. So thank you so much. I appreciate you being honest and vulnerable, and yeah, I'm sure it will be immensely helpful to many people. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then also one more thing I forgot to mention. In relationship to the RTT, and working with relationships and stuff, I've also found that I have a really, really great grasp on helping people get more in touch with their intuition and being able to kind of differentiate between like what they're hearing thought wise in their head and then what they're hearing, from the intuition. So if anybody's interested in learning more about that. Hmm.
Great. Yeah, that's another angle again. And
Yeah,
again, not something that we hear so much about. So
yeah.
yeah, very interesting. So yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'm really glad that I got to come on the show. This was fun.
Okay. Thanks. Good night then, everyone. Thanks.